Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast here on YouTube and at audio channels. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Andrew Musgrove. If you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. I realised yesterday on the Monday show with Aaron Stokes that I mentioned Fabian Schar getting his new deal in the introduction, but then we forgot to speak about it because we were so over the moon about Newcastle beating Sunderland and we focused our attention on that. And then we argued about Calvin Phillips. So I thought on this wonderful, dull and grey Tuesday afternoon, we would speak about Fabian Schar, but not with Aaron Stokes. No, we're going to get a favourite of the podcast back on. It is Sam Mulliner from Newcastle Fans TV. Sam, welcome back to the show. How are you keeping?
A favourite? Who would have thought? Yeah, very well. Positive news. And after a magnificent derby win at the weekend to lift everyone's spirits, one of our sort of key players from days of present and recent past has signed on for another year.
It was the deal I think many fans wanted to be announced more than any other. He's been absolutely superb under Eddie Howe. When you saw the news break on Monday morning, what was your initial thoughts?
I thought it was just a case of when and not if, to be honest. I never for 1 minute thought we were letting Fabian Schar leave this month or let his contract run out towards the end of this season. It was never really in doubt, was it? But it was always, as I say, just when and not if. And it makes total sense. And total sense from both sides of the kind of argument, because it's not a silly long contract that the previous ownership used to do to hand out 3, 4, 5 year deals to people on the wrong side of 30. It's a sensible contract, and Schar deserves it. The journey he's been on at Newcastle alone, and he's been absolutely magnificent for quite some time. Well, no, he's been magnificent pretty much throughout his Newcastle career, hasn't he? Yeah, it just makes total sense, and I'm glad he's staying for another year.
I'm going to argue with you on that slightly because I have to admit, before Eddie Howe came in, I wasn't the biggest fan of Fabian Schar. I always thought he had something, but I thought he was more Stephen Taylor than Jonathan Woodgate. He had more errors in his game than he did clean sheets. But we'll speak about that in a moment because I can see your face when I've just said that, Sam. But we'll just clear up what's happened. Fabian Schar signed an extension to his contract until the summer of 2025. And you would think there's probably more to come as well. Maybe Jamal Lascelles, but we'll get Sam's view on that in a moment. But you mentioned there, Sam, the fact that he's always been good at Newcastle United, and I've disagreed with you. Do you actually think that, or do you not think it's over the last couple of years or so where he's really found his feet, really found his form? Because by what you're saying, you've not been too shocked at his form in the last couple of seasons, whereas I'm shocked. Like I knew there was a player there, but I didn't think he was this sort of level.
The initial shock, I think, is long gone now, because there was always question marks about whether he could play in a flat back four, but those have been answered pretty comprehensively now, haven't they? Signed by Rafa, I mean, it was one of the best £3 million Newcastle United have ever spent in recent times. Has to be.
Well, the funny
It's
thing
not been
about that is,
total.
though, Sam, that if you believe some, he wasn't Rafa Benitez's first, second, and possibly maybe even third choice when he signed, and here we are celebrating him getting an extension to his stay. So I mean, it is a proper good old turnaround, isn't it? Really.
Some things are just meant to be, and this may well be one of them. But yeah, it's certainly one for the history books. £3 million. I mean, some kind of lesser teams in the past have paid more than that for a dodgy striker. So, I mean, yeah, what an absolutely fantastic piece of business it's turned out to be. Not total smooth sailing in a Newcastle shirt. I take your point, but I think that's more of a general thing rather than a Fabian Schar thing, or more of a Steve Bruce thing. But yeah, there was always the question marks about him playing in a flat back four. Those have been answered. He was magnificent in the days where Rafa played the wing backs, five at the back. For that time, alongside Jamal Lascelles and Florian Lejeune, I thought the three of them were absolutely superb at that time for where we were. I thought it gave him it gave him that license to roam, to be a bit of a Philippe Albert, and to score some absolute wonder goals that he's done from centre back. He's just been thoroughly value for entertainment, and now he's shored up the defensive side of the game as well. Who'd have thought it? Because you would have had to have said that, Newcastle should maybe be looking at bringing in another centre half last transfer window, or certainly in the near future. But Schär's kind of proven a point, as well as Lascelles to a certain extent this season. He's put a timely reminder about what he can do in a Newcastle shirt. So it's good to see, and it's amazing what a bit of training and coaching and player development can do under the right manager.
You are right. For me, the biggest turnaround has been his defensive play, because I always felt he had a mistake in him. He always did something a little bit careless. He would always make a silly, rash challenge of a striker got the better of him. But he's cut that out of his game near enough entirely. I think last season it was still there in 1 or 2 games where you just saw him stick out a leg when he knew he wasn't going to match striker for speed. But what he's actually done, he's done what really good defenders do, and he's got it into his game where he doesn't need to make a challenge, because he's going to get there first. And when he does need to make a challenge, he can't half hit a sliding challenge and win the ball. So to see him eradicate those mistakes, which I think were quite often in his game under the likes of Rafa Benitez and Steve Bruce, you just got to applaud him for the hard work and whatever Eddie Howe, Jason Tindall, and the rest of the staff have done to really progress his career. And it at the kind of closing stage of his career as well, with all due respect, they've actually turned him into a top quality Premier League defender. And at 32, some might see those numbers and think, well, how many games is he realistically going to play? You do mention the fact it's a short-term deal, which probably lends itself to both being in Newcastle's favour and Schär's favour. But are you seeing him being first choice next season?
It wouldn't surprise me if we were sat here in 12 months' time and he signed another 12-month extension. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. But obviously that's dependent on his performances. There's an incentive there to continue his good form. Can his body hold up to that? I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. Although there is always the heart-stopping moment in games when Schär does go down and clutch a limb here and there, which is always nervy, especially given the current situation with injuries. But yeah, it's one of them where one of the older guard that were there during the dark days, they've stepped up. They've stepped up to be and made themselves be counted, along with the likes of Longstaff, along with the likes of your man Miguel Almiron, who was back to a good bit of form against the Mackhams at the weekend. As right they should be, because they were terrible. But yeah, it's been great to see. And let's not forget, Swiss international played on the biggest stages internationally. All right, not the latter stages, but they're still always in these knockout competitions. And he's, as well as being an exceptionally handsome chap, he's also proven to be what is now a rock solid Premier League defender. And from just pre-takeover, heading to Championship, to now, when he was out the door, pretty much, Bruce didn't fancy him whatsoever, along with a couple of others. And now Champions League defender. He'll always have that goal against PSG, and no one will ever forget that. So for me, he cemented his place in Newcastle United history, really, just with that goal alone. Not to mention the quite considerable collection of bangers he's scored over the years.
Yeah, he can't half hit a ball in the back of the end. It's funny you mentioned the fact that he was nearly out the door under Steve Bruce, because there was a time when Kieran Clark was the main man at centre back, and the likes of Fabian Schar weren't getting a look in. And it is quite amazing that you sit here, and had this deal not come about and he was allowed to leave in the summer, then Newcastle fans would have been very disappointed that Schar was let go. And you also mentioned, Sam, about the flat back five that they used to play back in the day, and how it was Jamal Lascelles part of it as well. And if I had said to you back then under Rafa Benitez that in 2024, Newcastle will be playing in the Champions League or 2023, because unfortunately they're out of it. But you get what you get the I'm getting at. They would have been playing with Jamal Lascelles and Fabian Schar as the centre back pairing. You would have laughed me out of Tyneside, right?
I would have immediately taken you for a test regarding illegal substances. That's what would have happened, and the fact that the pair of them dealt with the likes of Mbappe at a canter. Let's face it, over 180 minutes of football, home and away against PSG. Mbappe never had a sniff until that disgrace of a penalty. They've coped admirably in the Champions League. Didn't look out of place at all, and it just does go to show just the difference time spent on the training ground makes. Because I mean, look, even under Rafa, when we'd have to switch up occasionally, and under Steve Bruce, my word, when he ventured into some pretty desperate tactics at times, it's been calamitous. It was calamitous at times, but there's none of that anymore. I know our defensively during our run of late has been a bit of a kind of bump in the road, I think, rather than a more permanent problem. But on the whole, generally speaking, the defence over the past couple of years has been very un-Newcastle like, and hopefully we can get back to that going forward.
Yes, fingers crossed. Mentioned there the length of the deal, Sam. It's an extension to next summer. Do you think, given where Newcastle have been this season and where they hope to go in the future, it actually gives them more bargaining power when it comes to these sort of deals? Because back under Bruce, back under Benitez, when it was Mike Ashley in charge, you were maybe going to these players and saying, right, extend your deal for a year. And they would be here going, well, what are we going to win in the next year? What are we going to be playing in the next year? And also be saying, well, actually, I'm going to stop. I'm not just taking 12 months. I want 2, 3 years, because I want a bit more security if you're going to make me play here. And actually, we're just making up the numbers in the Premier League.
Well, there's definitely more of an incentive to stay at Newcastle now. Of course there is, because we're a team going places, and hopefully we can have a bit of an FA Cup run to kind of not necessarily salvage our season, because we've had some amazing days this season, Champions League nights, and we've had a good run in the Carabao Cup. Very, very unfortunate not to be playing in the semi-final tonight. But, we're still a team on the up. We're still a team going places, and it should make, as you say, negotiations a hell of a lot more easier with the current contingent of players to extend their stay. It also says a lot to me regarding financial fair play and eventually looking towards a replacement centre-back, because as we know, as we've said a couple of times about his age, Lascelles isn't getting any younger either. A centre-back should be on the agenda in the next 12, 18 months for a young defender, for Sven Botman's long-term partner, really. So that's maybe brought them a bit of time just to get in favour with FFP a little bit, because I think it's got a lot of clubs, including Newcastle, running scared because of the situation with Everton. Chelsea and Man City will be next. Who knows what's going to happen with them? So I think it's got a few clubs scared.
So, Sam, let me just read you what Fabian Schar said after signing his new deal. He said, I've said it a lot of times, but I feel really at home here. I feel so comfortable living in Newcastle. I love the city. I love playing for the club and the incredible fans. I can't say enough how much I love them, how much their support means to me. Playing for this team where I feel so comfortable with all my teammates and with the coaching staff feels really like a family for me. So I'm grateful to stay here a bit longer and hopefully to have some exciting times. So from all of that, what are you picking out? That actually professional footballers are very happy to live on Tyneside?
Who'd have thought it, eh? Maybe London's not all what it's cracked up to be. But yeah, it's one of them places, Newcastle, that gets under your skin, and you learn to. Well, you don't need to learn. It just captures your heart, and you love the place. And It's quite evident from those quotes there. He's loved his time here so far. There's a brilliant affinity between him and the fan base. He's of course a fan's favourite. Some of his performances, some of his goals, as we mentioned earlier, his resume of goals he scored for Newcastle United are just absolute works of art. From absolute thunder strikes to like that goal against Cardiff, where he's almost Ben Arthur'd everyone and ran through the whole of their team. He's just a phenomenal talent. And yeah, it's whereas maybe in the past when some players signed a new deal, you'd maybe kind of roll your eyes a little bit and think, well, he's just signed because they don't want to reinvest. Whereas now, players signing new deals is great news. It really is. And we've had Bruno sign a new deal now. Schar, there's going to be more. Lewis Miley's got to be next, surely. And although you were saying earlier about maybe Jamal Lascelles is putting pen to paper.
Yeah, I would like to see Jamal Lascelles extend his stay for another year as well. I think he's been excellent alongside Fabian Schar when Sven Botman has been out injured. So for me, I would be disappointed to see Lascelles leave in the summer unless he really wants to go in search of first team football. But I think this season has proven to him that you never know what comes around the corner, and he's also proven that he can rise to the challenge like Fabian Schar has done, like Joe Linton has done, and become an even better player when no one really saw that coming. So fingers crossed Lascelles is next through the door of the extended stays at Newcastle. And we've got him also saying, well, actually, first I was going to mention about the coaching staff, but the point about when usually, or in olden times when players sign new deals, Sam, you might roll your eyes. But this time, this one feels especially a little bit different. It sets the bar, doesn't it? Because I think a lot of people will still want another centre back to come in the summer, but it's going to have to be a very good, talented centre back to displace Fabian Schar from this first team.
Yeah, and I totally understand the want to sign a new centre back. I would be in agreement on the whole. Look, Jamal Lascelles has had a tremendous journey with Newcastle United, and I've defended him so many occasions when he was getting flack. And I think it's important not to have short memories and not to be overly fickle when it comes to players, because players will inevitably drift in and out of form, as we've seen with the likes of Kieran Trippier and Almiron. But Lascelles is a guy who, again, could have been out the door a couple of times, stood up and had to be counted, and gone from Championship to Champions League. It's a fantastic story, and it's so well deserved. Whether I think it will split people, actually, whether or not we should sign them on a new deal or whether the need is out there for another centre-back. I think the next centre-back we do sign will be a long-term replacement and a long-term partner for Sven Botman. But with Schar staying, I think that's probably, you can afford to delay it 12 months minimum, because it's such a balancing act and it's an absolute nightmare. FFP, we can't just go out and spend all the money we have. But yeah, when the time comes that you do look for a new centre back, it's going to have to be a major player, because you have to look to improve your first team. We're not just signing players just to fill a space in the squad. This is a squad that's going to be challenging, or wanting to be challenging, on all fronts. And we've seen the need for more strength in depth, certainly so far this season. And the next centre back we sign is going to have to be Sven Botman like.
How important is it for Sven Botman that Fabian Schär's found this new level and being consistent with it as well? Because I mentioned Stephen Taylor earlier in the show, and I always look back and think what a player he could have been if he'd had the right person alongside him to help him develop, to help him learn, just to become a better player. And with Sven Botman and Fabian Schär, the partnership has been excellent. And do you think Schar is playing an important role in helping Botman reach well, he will become arguably probably the best centre-back in the Premier League, we hope, in the next couple of years. And do you think Shar's going to play a role in that?
Yeah, 100%. You're right, Sven Botman will be the best centre-back in the Premier League. He's well on his way already. So long as he can stay injury-free and not aggravate that ACL. But yeah, it's a case of the back four, well, back five if you include Nick Pope in that as well. It was a key feature of last season, wasn't it? That stability and that understanding the relationship those guys built. It earned them a flag from War Flags, didn't it? It's absolutely massive to have that stability, and that breeds confidence. It was huge. It was one of the only times in living memory where Newcastle United had a proper, genuine, strong, sturdy defence. Like you said, it's a great point, actually. I don't want to big you up too much. That's a really good point about Stephen Taylor, former guest on the Greenwood and Mulliner Show podcast. Listen and download now. Rate 5 stars. But yeah, we didn't have that during and if you think this is a player that was there from Sir Bobby up until Rafa Benitez. How many managers and years of all them and centre-backs came through the revolving door at Newcastle United in Stephen Taylor's time, and not one of them could provide genuine kind of A, longevity, B, ability, and C, to aid Stephen Taylor's development. Because, if he'd have stayed fully fit, there's no reason at all why he couldn't have broken into the England squad. No reason at all. It's a shame, really, but Sylvie. But yeah, that partnership, Botman, Schar, Lascelles can fill in when need be. Byrne can obviously come across and fill in when need be. They've got the little additions there. Trippier and Livramento are both flexible in right back, left back positions as well. They'll all have that understanding. It's once we're back on track and this defence solidifies once again, it's a major boon in Newcastle United's cap there.
It certainly is. I just want to go back to those quotes from Fabian Schar, and he references the feeling kind of within the club. He says, I'm so comfortable with all my teammates and with the coaching staff. It feels really like a family for me. And I guess that's another change in what we've seen over the last couple of years, where under previous managers, under particularly Steve Bruce, it always felt very disjointed, very they weren't united. I think is probably the right phrase. Whereas everyone here is pulling in the same direction, and Shar's not the only one to come out and say it, but the fact he has come out and said it and made a point about it in this news is again a little tip of the hat to what Eddie Howe's creating at Newcastle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the centre backs on paper that we had just before Eddie Howe. They weren't bad players. The likes of Lejeune, I thought was a fantastic centre back. Federico Fernandez could do a job on his day. More than that. It was just a lack of cohesion from those above him, and we've seen that. Not just in the defence, but all over the pitch. There's a plan. There's the players know their job. There's a structure. So Eddie Howe's a big, huge part of that, which is why, let's face it, he's not okay. He might be under pressure a little bit because the results aren't what they are and it's football, but there's never really any danger of him being replaced anytime soon. And it's one of them that he's done so much and we've come so far in a short space of time that players like Schar, players like Longstaff, players like Joe Linton, it is like a family that they've grown together in this team, in this squad.
I guess when players know exactly what they're doing and they can see a plan, they can see that the work being put in during the week before the game, that makes things a lot easier, doesn't it? That just makes you happy. Even if you maybe don't pick up the result you want and you'll be angry at that, as long as you can see the bigger picture and that there's actually something being worked towards, which again is what Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall are trying to implement, that of course makes you feel right at home and you do want to stay at the club, don't you?
Yeah, so there's a choice of two options really. The first option is work hard on the training ground, know what is expected of you, know your role within the team, and work hard and achieve. Or there's the other kind of choice, which is dust yourselves down, go again, and see what happens. Kick the ball around a bit, look for St Maximin, and pray that he can do something. I'll let you decide which one was which.
And a wish manager, indeed. And I just want to quickly mention the comments of Eddie Howe. He said, Fabian has been excellent for us since I've come to the football club. He's been a model of consistency and a big part of our success. He's defended very well, but he's hugely talented with the ball as well. So we're delighted that he's extended his time here. I think what I'll pick out from that, Sam, is he's been a model of consistency. That's what we like from Eddie Howe, isn't it? Boring, but straight to the point. It's all about consistency.
Yeah, and consistency is huge for a defence, massive. And on top of that, when you get a ball playing centre half like Fabian Schar who can ping passes, well, the pair of them can. Schar and Botman can. It's priceless because you can change it up. You can play it from the back. You can ping a long pass, and that consistency in the defence, not just stopping us conceding goals, but starting attacks, starting the break. We're incredibly lucky to have such a player for such little outlay of £3 million. It's unheard of these days in the Premier League.
So that leads me on to my final two questions then, Sam. Bargain of the decade, Fabian Schar, even more than the likes of maybe Ayoze Perez. Some might try and throw in Trippier into the mix, but he costs too much to be considered a bargain, I would argue. So, Fabian Schar, best bargain of the decade for Newcastle?
Yes, because of the price tag. I mean, when you get into eye-watering figures, I could put in Bruno as bargain of the decade because look at the price tags that guys like Declan Rice and Moise Caicedo were going for, and Bruno cost less than half of that. But yeah, for the sheer price tag alone, Fabian Schar, £3 million. What can that get you in football these days? Like teams in Wrexham could be spending that money in League Two. It's absolutely incredible that a Premier League side has got not just a player like that, but the length of service we've had out of him as well. And like Eddie Howe said, consistency since he's been at the club. You've got to be bargain of the decade.
Just finally, many people will hold Joe Linton up as the man who has turned his career around the most under Eddie Howe. But does Fabian Schar rival him slightly for that title? Because, as I said earlier in the show, the viewpoint of me was he was, I have to be honest, kind of an average centre-back until Eddie Howe came into the fold and it has turned him into this Champions League star.
You could make a case for so many, though, couldn't you? Pretty much anyone that's still there now that played under the previous regime, you could make a case for. Obviously, Joe Linton's the main one. Of course, Sean Longstaff's back to where he was under Rafa. But yeah, players like Longstaff, players like Schar, they were out the door. If the takeover didn't happen, the change of manager, if that didn't happen, those kind of players were out the door, and we'd be left kicking ourselves. And they would have been out the door for cheap as well. So we really would have been kicking ourselves, letting players of that ilk go. But yeah, Schär's right up there. He has to be, and you could make a case for so many. Though that's the kind of job Eddie Howe's done with these guys. But yeah, long may it continue.
Yes, indeed. Fingers crossed. Well, Sam, thank you very much for putting me onto the Everything is Black and White podcast to talk all about Fabian Schar. To you guys listening, please give us a rating and a review. To you guys watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news from me and Sam. We'll see you guys very soon.